I can still see the road to camp when I close my eyes. I grew up in Denver, Colorado, and my synagogue was unique. Actually, all synagogues are unique, but mine had a special uniqueness, which was that my synagogue growing up owned its own Jewish summer camp called Schwader Camp, which was my home for 6 incredible summers. And my camp was a lot like how I imagine your camp was. We had a Hadar Ochel and a basketball court, and we had a spot that generations of campers sat at for fire pits and sing-alongs, and we had a rocking Shabbat song circle and a ropes course and a lodge for the CITs that the campers were always trying to sneak into. And we had made-up words that we added to the birkat, and we had Israeli counselors who kept trying to teach us to swear in Hebrew, and we had B'nai Mitzvah tutoring for 6th and 7th graders, and we had camp drama, and we had camp romance, and we didn't have a lake, and we didn't have a pool because we were in the Rocky Mountains, but we did have some very friendly bears that proved our counselors right when they told us that really, no, it's a bad idea to keep food in your cabin. And like I said, when I close my eyes, I can actually still see the road to camp as it went off of the highway and took us up an unfinished dirt road into the woods, past the baseball diamond, and towards that special, really impossible space that lives as much in memory as it does in the real world. And you can prove me wrong if you're also a Schwader Camp alum, but we did not go to the same camp. And yet, despite the differences, there is something so magical about camp that we actually share things in common. And part of that shared magic is that it lives in the collective memory of each person who experienced it. You may be several years or even decades older than me, and yet when I describe my time at camp, I have no doubt that your own days of those bygone summers flashed before your very eyes. And you may be much younger than me, and yet I have no doubt that for you, when I said about those things, your special days at camp, even if it was only 6 months ago or a year and 6 months ago, they came to you as well. And maybe you're one of the people in this room who never went to camp. And if that's the case, you're going to have to lean into our collective memory, the films and the cultural elements that allows you to know what Jewish summer camp looks like, even though you've never been there. And yet somehow you might find that you kind of still remember it because it's such a present part of culture. Shared collective memory is vital. It is a fundamental part of the Jewish story. It is in fact so fundamental and vital that Jewish educator Avram Infeld says that for many Jews, memory has taken the place of history. Jews don't have history. He says we have memory. Avram teaches us that there is a fundamental difference between being able to recite dates and facts and data and the internalization of an experience. You can debate about whether something is historically accurate and to what degree. That is in fact what historians and archaeologists do. They look at broken pottery shards, they look at ruins, and they put it in a specific century, and they guess about what was going on in the world at the time and who lived there and who owned it. But all of that information doesn't mean you actually can feel something's story. But in the realm of memory, we don't need all of the details to be factually proven. We don't even need them to be accurate or true for a narrative, for a story to have huge impact on our lives, even for it to be one of the most defining moments of our lives. And if you don't believe me, I don't blame you. But how about this? I'll give you a few. Camp changed my life. It was the best summer I ever had. I grew up this summer. After that, insert hike, jump on the water skis, descent from the ropes course, song session, late night talk, staying up till dawn, sneaking out with my friends, first kiss. Everything is different. Those are not stories that live in history. You can't prove any of that with archaeological data or first-party evidence. Those are statements of memory. And yet, can you deny that any of those moments change a person's life? When a camper tells you everything just feels different now, who are you to tell them, show me the proof? Memory is amazing. And memory doesn't even have to be filled with details. How many parents in this room, upon picking up your child from camp, asked, how was it? They said, amazing. You said, what did you do? And they said, I can't remember. It's not about historical fact. It's not about perfect recall. It's about a core shared memory that defines the very experience of who we are. To Avram Infeld, that gentleman who told us that Jews don't have history, we have memory, the same thing is actually true about the Exodus from Egypt. He points out and says, go dig in the Sinai desert all you want. Uncover as many pyramids as you need to. Look for all your hieroglyphs and your tablets. Maybe you'll find us. Maybe you won't. But the Exodus is a part of my memory. It lives in my memory. It defines my Jewish identity at my very core. I recall it every Passover. I invoke it every day that I pray. My most fundamental, basic morality is entwined with my experience in Egypt. Do not oppress the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I don't remember being in Egypt, but the memory of Egypt is alive in me and in the Jewish people. And of course, there is another fundamental moment of memory that does not need history to prove itself true, and that is a moment that we will reenact, in fact. Tomorrow morning in the Torah service, we do it, in fact, every Shabbat morning in the Torah service, but especially this week, which is the experience at Mount Sinai and the giving of Torah. Avram writes, you and I met at Sinai. Whether or not it ever happened, we stood there together. We didn't just leave Egypt and end up in Israel. We stopped off somewhere, remember? Mount Sinai. Something happened to us there, something we remember to this very day. At Mount Sinai, we as a people entered into covenant with God, and we printed the visiting cards that define who we are and what our dreams are and the nature of our very relationship with God. Sinai is a core memory for the Jewish people. For many generations of Jewish youth, camp is the core memory. But for every generation of Jews, Sinai is the core memory. And the greatest, most wonderful, most powerful thing about having a core memory as a people is that we get to share it. We get to share it with each other, and we get to share it with the next generation. And that next generation may experience it very differently than we do. But it is no less true to them. It is no less true than the way that their previous holders of that memory held it. And it is a truth that transcends history, because it is a truth that is held only in memory. In school, I took a class called The History of Reform Judaism, taught by the eminent historian, Rabbi Dr. Gary Zola. And we watched a certain period, and we're learning about a certain period of American history that featured the growth, the explosive growth of Jewish summer camp. And as Dr. Zola was lecturing, he put up some photos onto the projector. And suddenly, we were transported to a place that is deeply familiar to many of my rabbinic colleagues, their literal home away from home in Zionsville, Indiana, which is none other than the Goldman Union Camp Institute, or Gucci. And there, in this photo of Gucci, in the 1970s, was a young man in a t-shirt with big sunglasses and a cowboy hat and the style of basketball shorts that was very popular in the 1970s, and he also had a bright red mustache. And this was a very familiar face, because it was none other than the professor lecturing in his youth at the camp. That was Dr. Zola, long before he had earned that title. And in showing us that photo, that he too was part of this story, part of this history, part of this memory, he taught us a lesson. And I don't think it was the lesson that was written down in his syllabus. What he said was, see, I have been there too. And this place is sacred to me too. And I remember it too. So tonight is a celebration as we remember the good days and the great moments at camp, whether it has been years in the past or whether you're going in just a few short months. And tomorrow we will stand and we will remember Matan Torah, the giving of Torah at Sinai, a place that none of us have ever been to, and yet all of us have traveled to many times, and a place where all of us will go to again. And through the power of memory, we make both of those places vibrant and alive and eternal. Through memory, we prepare a sacred connection and get it ready for the next generation to inherit, so that they may remember it for the very first time and for all time. Shabbat Shalom.